Well, I think it's fair to say that after an episode like this, I don't think anybody would begrudge me a drink. Whew. What's up, my know-it-alls? Welcome back to another episode of the Continental. Specifically, this is episode 2, also known as Loyalty to the Master. So this is an episode that, okay, things get a little more rolling now. Some people complain that last episode was a little slow for what the Continental's supposed to be and what the John Wick series kind of is. And while I disagree, this episode kind of continues more or less right where we left off, which is that Winston's decided he's going to put together a team. Oh yeah. So you have several things happening all at once, machinations that have exactly to do with the Continental, more specifically sort of this cat and mouse game that's being played. There's a huge issue with Winston's approach in that he doesn't fully grasp what it is he's walking into. Now, I actually think that plays into this entire thing because, there's a little saying that says, hey, the thing you don't know is difficult, for you is not difficult. And I think that's exactly the situation Winston finds himself in. I feel like Winston, because he doesn't understand what he's talking about doing, maybe he does, but he thinks it's like, hey, what? Because they literally say in this thing, it's crazy to want to hit or take down the Continental. And he's like, it's only crazy because no one's ever tried it. No one's ever tried it because they think it's crazy. That's why it's going to work. So it's a bit of a trope in these kinds of things where it's like, hey, nobody's going to try it because it's crazy. I mean, we've seen it in all the other, in heist movies. We've seen it in other high crime movies and things of that nature. But overall, I'm actually quite impressed with how they execute the plan right this time. Let's get into it. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about. The first is Winston's mission. So Winston's mission is very simple. He's going to put together a crew in order to take out and essentially kill Cormac. Very simple, very cut and dry. Then there's this flashback that kind of reveals more or less, it takes us back to 1955, the night that we started last episode in, but this time, and it's in black and white again, but this time what you see is the actual thing that happened. What happened was that the kids were hired by Cormac to go ahead and throw a Molotov cocktail into someone's window. They think it's just burning down a business. So then Frankie really wants to be the one to do it. So what does he do? He insists, and of course, his brother's gonna let him, not Frankie, rather Winston. And so Winston hurls it in, and then he hears people screaming. And that's really when it became real for him. And he's crying his eyes out, and Frankie's like, come on, and they run. That's the thing when they're in the police station in the first episode, where he goes, oh, well, you have to be careful and you have to whatever else because, don't tell them anything. Don't say anything to them, Frankie. If anyone asks, I did it. So that's the first part of this whole thing. Then we shift over to KD. Oh, by the way, KD is the name of that female police officer who I couldn't remember her name last time, the detective. Yeah, she goes by the name of KD. And so her whole deal, come to find out, is that she's trying to investigate and find out who's responsible for the death of her family. She finds out that it was Frankie. The issue is Frankie's dead. So what do you do with that? And you get this entire procession scene where when it comes to Frankie's death, where they got the body, they recovered the body, they pay the coroner's office guy to bring it, and they have it cremated, and they have a little mini kind of thing, and there's a little urn. That's when Yen wakes up. Remember, Yen was down last episode because she got shot, and she walks in and she's like, where's Frankie? And everybody kind of looks, and they see the urn, and she's mad. Man, she's mad, and she puts everybody down. And by that, I don't mean with harsh language and witty repartee. When I say she puts everybody down, I mean she whoops their asses, period. And it's rough, man. It is rough what happens. So at this point, she's angry and she storms out. So now we have Lou. And Lou is the owner of the Black Dojo. The dojo, martial arts dojo in Chinatown? Yeah, that's right. And she's dealing with some drama of her own. There's a bunch of story threads that are going, They're dropping so many subplots and threads that I feel like are supposed to eventually take us to things as if this was a series, like an actual series. And so I'm hoping that's not necessarily the case. I'm hoping that it's gonna get cleaner before not. And we'll ultimately see what that whole thing, how it susses out. But so Lou's deal is that she gets back to her shop, her dojo, and there's this guy is installing a cigarette machine, and she's like, "Hey, what's this? What's going on? This and that." This is where she meets this guy who's called the Orphan Maker, or the Orphan Master, because everyone's got to have fun, cool, codenamey type, schlocky pulp names in this thing. And the Orphan Master is this Asian gentleman he's got a little kid with him and whatnot, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I don't care what kind of deal your dad had with the town, blah blah. You have to pay your dues," and this, he's being real crappy about it. And she basically threatens him. But wait, I'll get back to that in a minute, because she is bad. She's a bad woman. The issue you have is that she's gonna stand her ground and she's not gonna be bullied. And then so later on, she's coming around and there's this kid who throws a rock in her window and she chases him down only to get, and dude's got all these guys try to attack her. Bro, sister whoops up on these guys big time. It is amazing watching her pound these guys, send these guys down to Pound Town. She whoops them hardcore. I'm talking just straight up like martial arts, like kapayo and shapam. It's amazing and well worth the price of admission. And so dude's like, "All right, you've embarrassed them enough." And he says in Chinese, like, "You guys go home. You're making me sick over here." She's whooping. I'm like, why are you trying to fight female Dolomite? Okay, why are you trying to fight Lady Shaft? She's whooping up y'all bad. Anyways, and so she gets back to her place, and really in the sign of defiance, she takes that cigarette machine and throws it out. One of the guys they hire, this nearsighted assassin, this nearsighted sniper, which is a phrase I don't think I ever thought I'd say. But he's like, "Oh, so I take it we quit smoking?" And it's just, yeah, it's super funny. There's a couple of really interesting and very notable characters that I feel like need to be brought up at this point. Yen obviously is unbelievable, and during her, so then she goes back to the theater, and she's kind of and by the way, she goes back to the theater. I'll get to that in a minute. While she's in the theater, she has a dream. And it's a flashback to 1970 some odd in Saigon. And you find out she was supposed to be a suicide bomber during the war. For some reason, the thing didn't work, and she meets Frankie, and then she wakes up, and that's when she went and she found his body. Anyway, so she's not really happy, and she's trying to find herself, and then she gets jumped. Oh, dude's not wasting any time. Cormac is wasting no time. Why? Cormac got a visit, specifically from an auditor. And if you've watched the John Wick series, then you know exactly what an auditor means. And he's in the middle of having dinner, and there's this guy playing the cello who he will come back around later. And she's like, "Oh, this is awfully celebratory." He goes, "No, it's comfort food. I promise. That's all. It's just comfort food."
Comfort food, nothing more.
So the auditor she's the lady with the mask, and she sits there and she says, "Oh, don't let me stop." She takes her mask off. We don't ever see her. She's from behind. So then she takes a fork and she eats, and he's like he doesn't want to look at her face. So something's going on with her face. We don't know what, because by the time they show her again, she's putting her mask back on. And she basically says, "You have 3 days to get your house in order. 3 days to find the press, bring those who are responsible to our feet, or we will literally bring this place. We will take you down. Until we can name a successor." And she's not playing, because this institution, the Continental, is not going to be brought down because of Cormac's goofy little butt. One of the other interesting characters is Charon in this. Charon is very much, he's trying very hard to stay who he is, to stay the course. Remember, Charon is he's a very loyal person. This is just the younger version of the guy we're gonna see eventually in the John Wick movies. And I feel like you have to make sure, you have to understand where he's coming from. So he's extraordinarily loyal. He's got family and whatnot. His father's a musician and this whole thing. And he has a conversation with the cellist, and the conversation is very simple. The guy's like, "Yeah, no, he's gonna go at a conservatory. He's gonna do this and that." And he says, "Charon, you should come with me. We can go see anything, whatever you want, blah, blah, blah." And Charon's like, "No, my future's here, this and that." Very loyal, very loyal. Loyalty to the master. So when Cormac finds out, Cormac has the kid brought up and he's talked to him and he has the kid play. So he goes, play something that reminds you of loyalty or whatever else. And the kid plays a bit from Don Giovanni. The theme is loyalty to the master. And that's where we get our title for the episode. So during this, Winston meets up with Charon because he realizes Charon might be the inn. Might be. So he meets up with Charon on a bus that they have acquired, and he basically talks him through. He says, "Look, I know how it was. I know what it's like to be the kid that Cormac picks up and all this other stuff. Because that's who he was. That's who him and Frankie were." So what does he do? He ends up he makes him an offer, and I don't know fully what happens, but as soon as dude gets back, Cormac killed the cellist because he says to Charon, "I'm tired of people trying to steal from me." So he killed the cellist. And Charon spills the beans. He's like, Winston's put together a team, they're going to take you out, this and that. No question. The whole situation is about loyalty, no question. So Winston, so he says to him, what did he try to steal? And he goes, you. I was like, oh, bro, stop it. So let's get into some of the elements here that made this episode really good. So what are some engaging show elements for me? The fight choreography in this episode was top notch. I thought the martial arts was dope. It looked very much the era, meaning it doesn't look polished or clean like the choreography today often does. It looked real, if that makes sense. So it wasn't flashy or fancy, but it was genuine, and I believed it. The city street looked more like a city street this time. Didn't look quite so set run like soundstage like it did last time. The soundtrack's fine. But so in filmmaking, there's a thing called handling the audience. Music is designed to handle you. It can be anything from a very specific piece of music and they do that throughout the whole thing, and it's always really present, almost too much. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the music feels like it's not even a character, but an annoying character. I like the needle drops. I don't think we needed so many of them, but that's just my own personal preference. I mean, love to hear what you thought. Comment below. The soundtrack's dope. Like, I want this soundtrack for real. I'm literally going on my Apple Music account later, and I'm gonna start building a playlist just based on the music in this episode. So, and I'm gonna call it the Continental. I'll post a link to my Apple Music playlist in the description below. So, some plot developments that are happening is there's obviously there's a whole lot going on between the adjudicator, and the adjudicator's a scary woman. At one point after Cormac kills the cellist, the adjudicator finds out, he's like, hey, Cormac is killed on Continental property, and she says, keep it quiet, don't tell anybody, let them eat themselves to find the press. All she cares about is results. That's it. So without results, everything burns to the ground as far as she's concerned. And everything is able to be burned to the ground. We get our first look at the Bowery. Specifically, one of the characters affectionately calls her the Queen Pin. By the way, the Bowery, for those of you playing at home, that's that place where Lawrence Fishburne's character in the John Wick movies, it rules and runs over, and all the homeless people who are, and so like, to give you a quick example, while she's talking to Winston, because he goes to see her, these 3 SUVs pull up in front, and literally all these homeless people walking around, stop, turn, kill the drivers, get in the cars, drive off, the street is clean again. Like, whoa. It's the same nonsense that you saw Lawrence Fishburne's character doing, the Bowery King doing, and I think it's hilarious they call him the Bowery King because they call her the Queen Pin here. So I think the two of those things jibe. A lot of you said last week in the comments that you could see Miles becoming the Bowery King. I could kind of see that too. Oh yeah, I could totally see that. But she's awesome because she's like, I don't need money. It's like, you don't understand, I came from money. I don't want their money, I don't want yours. You know what I want? Love. And he's like, Winston's like, I don't understand what you mean. What? And she's like, yeah, I want love. What do? You take a homeless man off the street, you give him meaning and purpose, but then he embraces being invisible. And that's the whole premise of the Bowery. It's not, even though later on the High Tower's like, you think we didn't know you exist? We knew everything about y'all existing, whatever. It's an interesting setup that they have going on, and I'm definitely here for those developments and sort of seeing what that ultimately leads to. It's definitely gearing up for the climax with Winston and his crew. My prediction is I believe Charon telling him the truth was designed to put him off kilter. That's what I believe. I believe firmly that either Charon is lying, meaning telling him it is part of the plan, or more true, because this falls more in line with who Winston is later in the John Wick movies. Winston is actually the one who, knowing Charon's character, sends him back with knowing that he's going to tell him stuff. I think when you do that, I think that becomes the premise for when later on, because I believe firmly what's going to happen is the adjudicator's going to come in. Either adjudicator's going to have a conversation with Winston at some point. Winston's going to get the thing. She's going to be like, look, we just want the press. You want to run this place? Fine. You take him out, and then it's all yours. And they know that. Like, that's the premise. So there you go. Now you know. And if knowing's half the battle, you're halfway to being a know-it-all yourself. What's the know-it-all index for me for this episode this week? I got to tell you, I am far more about I like what they're doing, and I felt like this didn't feel quite so setup-y. And it did still, obviously, but there's things that, my fear and concern is all these threads, man. Like, what's happening there? My score for this week is easily gonna be, I'm gonna go a little higher than last. I'm gonna go 8.5. They're scooting up. 8.5 out of 10 for this week. All right, comment below. Let me know your thoughts on the second episode of the Continental, Loyalty to the Master. What did you think? Did you like how they're kind of setting some things up, both in the story, but also in the greater Wickiverse? We'll talk very, very soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video. It helps the channel grow, letting everyone know that you want to be part of the Know-It-All Nation. All right, you guys, shine them up, get them lock and load. Part 3 comes next week. And that's where we're really gonna shine. All right, never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.